Someone might have the impression that the brain is, if the brain is the most complex system in the universe, then the brain must be somehow different from other material complex systems. However, I think that in this case there's no difference in principle, it's just a matter of degree. You have different material systems with a different degree of complexity, and maybe the brain is on the top, so you might have like less complex material systems, and then you climb up the ladder, and on the top there is the brain as the most complex system. But the main reason why I think that it's just a matter of degree and not there's no qualitative jump, so to say, is that you can investigate material systems from a purely impersonal point of view. So I think you don't have to change the perspective in order to understand how the brain works. Some people might have the idea that there's a difference because the brain activity subserves our cognitive capacities. So some people might have the idea, well, if the brain is maybe the most important organ for us as a human person, because without the brain we cannot think, we cannot perceive, we cannot reflect, and therefore the brain must be somehow different from other organs. However, I think that's a mistake, because just looking at the brain as brain, everything you can know about the brain, it can be known from a third person impersonal point of view, so you don't have to change any perspective. Once you want to know why a person is doing something, let's say for instance why my arm goes up, so I have two ways of describing this movement. I can say, well, that's just an inner reflex of some neurophysiological processes going on inside me, and then all I need to explain this movement of my arm going up is an impersonal point of view, right? I need just to know what's going on inside me in order to see that the effect of this processes is my arm going up. On the other hand, if my arm goes up for a certain purpose, because I want to give you a sign, for instance, then I'm performing an action. And performing this action cannot be described anymore from a purely impersonal point of view. So this means that then you have to change the perspective. Then you're looking at this action of the arm going up from a first personal point of view, or from the point of view of the agent. The agent wants to achieve a certain goal, he wants to tell you something, he wants to give you a sign, and these are like this whole normative context within the action, like the aim or the plan to give you a sign, the plan to communicate with you in some form. These normative dimensions, they cannot be explained anymore by looking at the brain. So even though the brain might be extremely complex, even though the brain might be necessary for performing my action of raising my arm, just looking at the brain does not help me to understand why I was raising my arm. For understanding why I was doing this, you have to change the perspective. You have to change from an impersonal to a personal perspective. You have to reason, or you have to take into account my reasons, you have to take into account a certain normative context, and these are all features of the human person that cannot be seen, that cannot be studied anymore from the like impersonal point of view. So even though knowing everything about the brain's complexity would not really help you to understand these very important and basic features of our human existence, and therefore I think that even if the brain is far more complex than any other material system, it's still a matter of degree, and you don't need any additional or completely different epistemic access for understanding what the brain is doing when the brain is performing certain activities.